Okay, guys. Well, we have a couple of exciting guests here for our podcast, and so I'll just give a quick overview. This is a podcast that is put on by Start My Wellness. We try to answer questions that have to do with mental health. Today, we're going to focus on the connection between physical health, nutrition, kind of self-care, and mental health. But overall, we try to bring in professionals from the community who have different vantage points about self-care and things like that, and hopefully answer questions that provide a service to our community so that when somebody needs help or they don't know what kind of help they need or where to go, they're aware of resources and they can kind of use the video as something they could learn from. So we're going to interview Paul Haynes and Matt Clinton, and we're going to talk about a lot of cool topics having to do with physical health and emotional health and how they kind of work together. So if you can, maybe kick us off, Paul. Give us a chance, give the audience a chance to kind of get to know more about you, and then Matt, you as well, of course.
Hi, I'm Paul Haynes. I former professional basketball player. I played for 5 years in Europe, in Germany, Austria, and Hungary. I came back and started a business working with basketball players, which is basically what I was. So I have a business, a gym that does basketball training and development for pro players, college players, and grade school kids.
Okay, so basically, you kind of leveraged, you used a lot of what you learned yourself in your professional life, and now you help others kind of in their skill development, and maybe basketball in particular, but like personal development, right?
Yeah. I just wanted to use the experience that I had as a player to be able to, like you said, leverage it, help other players that are trying to basically kind of reach their potential.
For sure, makes sense. And then, Matt, what about for you? I know you're a clinical social worker. I know you're interested in sports psychology, but can you give us a sense of, what's kind of your background? What got you into the working with sports or athletes, or, things like that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my name is Matthew Clinton. I'm a therapist here at Start My Wellness. My kind of path to becoming a therapist, getting into social work was a little unconventional. I was originally my original background is in sport management, where I went for 4 years at Western Michigan University. And my original intention was to work in some sort of area of sport. And at that point in my life, I wasn't, you know, too sure about what that would actually look like. But yeah, after college, kind of found my way into more of the sales, customer service realm, where that's where I really started to develop those people skills that I have now and have sharpened since. And I kind of found what I found meaningful from it was the service of helping people. And that kind of helped me take it a step further when I started getting into social work, where I went to University of Michigan for their MSW program, Master of Social Work. And that love of sports, though, is still there. And I've taken that time to kind of educate myself on, you know, where, uh, where mental health and sports intersect. And it's actually quite prevalent. And these were things that I never really considered when I was a kid, when I was playing sports and, middle school, high school. So now it's like I really want to, kind of hone in on that. Now that I am still developing these clinical skills that I have, I've been a therapist for a little over a year now. So that's what I'm really starting to feel passionate about, and I'm excited to work with Paul and with Anton here to kind of um, find ways to help kids or whoever needs that support in athletics to get that support.
Okay, so you guys both have kind of interesting professional background that you bring to bear onto this sort of topic that we have, right? So maybe one way we could kind of kick off our discussion is, in your experience, what do you see as the connection between physical health and mental health? How does it work in practice? Like for example, Paul, like when you train young athletes, part of your training, I'm sure, has to do with like basketball skills, right? Or sort of, things specifically related to basketball. But part of it has to do probably with their growth, like how they see themselves, how they function. So where does the rubber meet the road in terms of like taking care of oneself and being a good athlete? You know what I mean? Can you say anything about that, Paul, in terms of like what's been your experience when you work with young people, adults or young people on their skills? What do you find yourself kind of common themes you hear or common challenges they face?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that in sports in the past, there's been a lot of focus. The primary focus has been on the body. Like it's been about, you got to get in shape, you have to be strong, you've got to be quick, things like that. Um, but like we've had a lot of success just by emphasizing the mind and the body. So we uh we kind of integrate everything into it because if someone is in good shape and they are fast, but they don't believe in themselves or they don't or they have a hard time with mistakes or whatever it may be, they're not going to be successful. So we we kind of took the opposite focus and focused on the mind first because we knew that the body would follow anyway.
I see.
So that was kind of that's the
Like
word.
if the person has, if they're, whether they're an athlete or not, if they have a good outlook, if they're kind of able to practice regularly, or they are not so self-critical, then they could learn the skills of the sport they could learn, but it's their sort of their mental, the way they feel and see themselves and the way they kind of operate in the world. Is that kind of your point? That's the element where if they had the right mindset, so to speak, they could be successful in various things, including as an athlete. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yes, yeah. Like if they have the right approach, then they'll learn all these specific details about the sport that they need. But a smart coach is going to look for someone who has the right mental characteristics, someone who's okay with making mistakes and someone who can kind of retain information somewhat quickly. Like these are the things that I think the smarter coaches are looking for more so than like a guy who's just fast or athletic or something like that.
Because they're going to need those emotional or intellectual skills to kind of really progress, right? Having speed or athletic ability is not enough to really excel. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, you can't in sports the mental qualities are more important than the physical. So the those are the qualities that coaches now are starting to figure out and they're starting to seek those. Like for example, if I saw a kid in my gym who missed 6 or 7 shots in a row and I could tell by their facial expressions that they aren't bothered by it,
Mm,
then that tells me a lot about that kid and
see.
the kind of confidence that they have that they can
Mm.
make that many mistakes, but they still think they're going to make the next shot.
But they're sort of resilient. They're not just kind of so upset about what happened. They can keep going, keep practicing, keep working on their skills.
Yeah, yeah.
What about,
And-
go ahead.
no, I was just saying those are the qualities that like I look for just when I see kids in my gym. Like I know you know that if you see a kid who makes mistakes but he still has composure, you know that that kid can be very successful.
That makes sense. And what about for you, man? I mean, what do you how does in your world of working with as a therapist, and I know sometimes you work with athletes, right, or kids who maybe are into sports. How does this how does this come up in your work? And also, are these skills develop? Can one develop that, right, Paul? Like you see the kid who's kind of not bothered by missing a few shots. What about somebody who is bothered by that? We might think like, well, how do we help that person? Because it's not like they're innately incapable. Maybe the way they approach or see themselves could be, they need to work on that too. So they're more forgiving or more resilient in some way, right? So, Matt, how
Right.
does that come up in your work, or what do you see?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. The kind of the idea of self-esteem. I think that's a really kind of a huge overarching thing that really factors into to a young athlete's success, and just how that can even carry into their personal life. I mean, when you're an adolescent, particularly, your self-esteem is ever so fluctuating and still developing, and
For sure.
there's so many other external factors that come into play as well, like whether that be peer pressure or social media or body image or expectations from family, whatever that may be. Those things can really come into play, and it's not you know particularly easy for a young athlete to come out and address those things, or even really identify that it's because of these things that this is how I feel, or this is why I'm missing these shots in these moments. So that's kind of where we work together, and we come in to kind of help those athletes navigate that, so that we can kind of help them come up with some sort of solution, or at least, start some work, that they can,
But
use to help themselves.
that's a really interesting point, because I think what you're saying is you're helping them with self-awareness. The young person may be saying, I don't know why I struggled in that game, that game or something, or I don't know why I had a
Hmm.
difficult time. And you help them to kind of tune into, well, maybe they were feeling anxious, or maybe self-critical, or
Hmm.
maybe blah, this or that, right?
Yeah.
And by understanding that
Hmm.
and kind of working on those internal processes, so to speak, hopefully they're starting to
Hmm.
feel more confident or more able to overcome those
Yeah.
difficult moments, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And, just, kind of helping them understand that, like, whatever it might be that is, the issue in their, um, you know, with their game, particularly like missing a certain amount of shots, is just kind of helping them understand that it's okay that you're not shooting like 40% from three or something like that. That it's like these are really difficult things to accomplish, and that it's
Yeah.
not that's not always the most important thing. It may be the way that you just carry yourself, and just the way that you help your teammates. I mean, other ways that can come in with, just being like, not, miss a shot, but, let's get to the next possession. It's just kind of, move on, move forward. It is what it is. Just, it's just, um, just kind of working on that mindset, which,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Go ahead,
Anton, if
Paul.
I
Yeah.
could add something to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
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 To expand on something that Matt has already said, as a neuropsychologist, what I look at the situation as is being, what is the student athlete, or what is the athlete paying attention to? This is my background as a neuropsychologist. What are they paying attention to? Are they paying attention to the last 10 shots they missed, or are they paying attention to the present
Mm,
and focusing on the next shot, or the shot that they're
for sure.
engaged in right now?
For sure.
People who have a lot of difficulty with self-confidence tend to ruminate on maybe the last 10 shots and not focus on right now, what's happening right now, and paying attention to what they're focused on at the moment and what their goal is at the moment. So it really is a question, in part, shifting the athlete's attention from what has happened to what is happening right now.
That makes sense. Bill, what do you think about what about uh, either a young person or an adult who, let's say, they play sports, right, but they have a hard time. I think what you're saying is they're overly focused on their, I don't know, mistakes or vulnerabilities, but maybe they also not taking stock, so to speak, of their competence. They're sort of focused on what I did poorly in the past and I feel bad, but they're not as aware of, there's no counteracting idea in their mind of, well, actually, I'm a pretty competent athlete in general. That shouldn't stop me from succeeding in my next, effort, right? So is that an aspect of it, like not seeing their
It's
abilities, maybe?
it so we could look at it as a personality trait of the athlete, or we could look at it as a skill, as a cognitive skill. As a cognitive skill, it can be taught.
Sure.
You can teach someone to pay attention to the moment. And so that opens up a wide berth of how we can help kids become better. And it's the same with academics. It's the same with everything in life. It can be a skill that can be learned.
Don't focus only on the idea being, don't focus only on what happened in the past or the bad things one has done, but be present and kind of aware of what some the opportunities in front of one, like right now, so to speak, right?
Right now. Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. I remember, Paul, you and I talked recently about, we were talking about sports and kind of like what's a good mindset for an athlete. One of the things you mentioned that we talked about is, I asked you something about playing tennis, and one of the things you said was a good athletic mindset is like when somebody's able to think not how amazing I am or how many shots I made, but what did I do with the opportunities in front of me? Was I able to be aware of the options in front of me in any given moment? And to what degree was I able to kind of take advantage of them? Not comparing myself to somebody else necessarily, but like my own optimizing my own abilities, right? I think that's one of the things I heard you say about like that's like I don't know, like a healthier or more successful sort of mindset, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Being able to, as an athlete, like we talked about, or really in any area of life, but sports is such a zero sum situation. Like you win or you lose. But, like a more emotionally stable athlete understands, I think, that winning and losing isn't all under your control. Like we like to think that it is, but the reality of it is referees, certain scenarios happening, maybe someone's sick that day, whatever reason. So, what makes the athlete, I guess, more secure in themselves is they can ask themselves, did I do the best that I did with the opportunities that I had?
Mm,
Um, Whereas maybe a less stable athlete evaluates everything completely on wins and losses. Like for example, if there's a uh, volleyball tournament with 50 teams in it,
yeah,
the team that comes in second place typically thinks they're a complete failure, and they, a lot of times they don't even want to take the trophy home. So they don't understand that they're better than 49 other teams.
for sure.
Um, But this is a mentality that's often, unfortunately, it's taught by a lot of coaches
Yeah,
as well. So, sometimes you may find yourself going against a coaching philosophy that an athlete learned. It might be a coach that tells them, "Hey, you guys failed because you didn't win the championship." So, that's another good point. Is that sometimes these kids are they may have coaches who are pushing them towards philosophies that may not help them emotionally.
right. No, that makes sense. And I think what you're saying is to try not to treat these situations as all or nothing. It's not did I win or lose is not the only question. It's what were the conditions? How did I individually contribute, or what areas did I struggle in, and where did I succeed? Kind of a more nuanced, like granular perspective that takes stock of one's strengths and weaknesses, and maybe even looks at like, okay, well, the things that I struggle with, I can work to improve. The areas where I did well, I want to feel good about and kind of take credit for I beat, me and the rest of the team beat 48 other teams. That's a huge success. That's a lot of teams and a lot of progress and a lot of really great skills that shouldn't be. I mean, yes, maybe it's disappointing to not win first place, but it shouldn't diminish the hard work, the accomplishment, the progress, the personal growth that came along with beating the other 48, right? Something like that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, there is an element to looking back. Like you do as a player, you do have to look back and say, okay, like to your point, what did we do well? What adjustments can we make for the future?
Sure.
But in terms of your overall like mentality or emotions toward it, you have to keep it in perspective and say, we would have liked to win, but at the same time we did really good. I mean, we beat these other teams. So there's a balancing act there because you don't want to be content either, but you don't want to have this mentality like I can't enjoy this because I'm not going to take the trophy home, but we're going to leave our trophies here because we didn't win it. Also, I think Dr. Bloom made a great point about the present moment
Mm,
and how important that is. I think that players that aren't as secure go back into the past and like relive bad moments and they let it affect the present. Like they'll go back to a bad game and they'll bring it to the present and they'll let it affect how they're currently performing. Or they'll be worried about the future. Like, oh, we have this hard game next week. We're never gonna beat them. So, as Dr. Bloom said, I think the present and the future like can hurt can hurt athletes as opposed to just being in the moment. Like he said.
sure, for sure. Um, to go back to the question of confidence, what Paul or Matt or Bill, like, what do you guys see as what helps either an adult or a young person develop confidence, right? So we're talking about it in a kind of interesting way. You don't want to be all or nothing. You don't want to just you don't want to be too focused on past mistakes, right? That's one part. Be present in the moment. Maybe take credit for one's accomplishments. Don't be overly self-critical about one's shortcomings. Don't blame oneself for, I don't know, things that are out of one's control, right? But those are maybe just some of my observations based on what you're saying. But what are ways that what is a realistic way to enjoy sports, feel good, incrementally grow one's skills? Like what do you guys see as kind of what might help anybody, but a young person develop like a good realistic view of themselves? Like they don't want to have false hopes of they're going to be necessarily, a worldwide star, but they also don't want to diminish their strengths, abilities, competencies, right?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'd like to kind of comment on that.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
I think yeah, it's not always about, going into athletics as like a way to, win a championship. I mean, that can be a motivation, sure, but athletics is a great opportunity for, kids, adults, whoever maybe, trying to get into sport, it offers, but maybe I'll talk in the sense of kids who are still developing their self-esteems, but it offers a sense of belonging and also that sense of structure and routine, something that, you know, uh, kids need and, can really
For sure.
benefit from. And it's a way to be social and active. It helps with some kind of that sense of purpose and goal direction, which is particularly important for adolescents who are kind of in that key developmental stage. But at the same time, there should also be a balance with that. With the concern of maybe over identification, saying that like, I am my sport in that sense, because
Yeah,
there's vulnerability to that with which can lead to more anxiety, depression, and even identity loss, which I've even kind of seen with some patients that I work with that have had some really nasty injuries that have kind of ended their high school careers. So it's that one, like, if they don't really have like another identity or a kind of vision for themselves, if it's only ingrained in sport, that could really hurt them if they're not kind of thinking about those things. So like there there's a
Yeah,
balance there.
sure. That makes sense. Bill,
Hmm.
what about from your perspective in terms of like developmental
Yeah,
psychology or
yeah, yeah. Well, when I think of adolescents, particularly, or younger people, I think of the importance of the peer group in forming a person's identity. And so when I look at, building confidence and assurance of one's self-worth, the group as a whole contributes to that. And a well-functioning team that everybody is supportive of each other and that they really feel part of a group, and the group has a positive self-esteem and the group is encouraging to all of its members. I think that can enhance each of the members of the groups, each of the members of the team's own self-confidence and self-worth. And that doesn't necessarily it isn't necessarily impacted by a win-loss tally, but rather effort and commitment and improvement and support of each other. So looking at the team, looking beyond the individual and looking at the team and how the team is functioning
yeah.
is something that can enhance each of the members of the team's self-esteem and self-confidence.
Right. It's really interesting because I think, if one watches kind of sports on TV, a lot of focus is on like stats, right? Performance, who won, where's the season, and those things, they're fun and interesting. But for the individual, I think all of you guys are saying that it's much more about their experience and who they're around and how they see themselves and how they progress. There's a lot more of a nuanced kind of view of what's their life actually like, not what it looks like on TV, so to speak, but what's the day to day, who are the people they're around, and do those experiences help them kind of shape a good sense of their abilities and have connections with others. It seems like that's what you guys are kind of commenting on. Um, I know that one of the we're sort of talking about emotional health, sports. I know that one of the ways that we're going to be working together, Paul, your organization and Start My Wellness, is that you and Matt are going to be running groups for kids, right? I mean, out of your experience as a former professional athlete and now somebody who helps develop athletes of different ages, I know one of the things you've told me is that this sort of like character building, self-esteem, self-worth, I don't know, athletic sort of resilient, emotional resilience is something you really see as important. And Matt, I know from your work as a therapist, you also, you see that the way we function in the world and the way we, whether it's sports or somewhere else, a lot of it has to do with how we deal with situations or setbacks or challenges, right? And so we're working on this really cool project together where we're going to have groups for young athletes to kind of develop these sort of personal characteristics. Can you guys talk a little bit about your vision? What do you hope to accomplish through these kind of groups? How do you imagine structuring them? And because I know we want to get started in the new year to, help recruit young people and their families to really participate. We think it's going to be a really unique offering. A former professional athlete, a licensed therapist. It's a really unique, I was doing some research on the internet of groups like that exist. Usually they're much more limited. There might be like some kind of recordings or videos, but they're not this kind of combination of, of your professional background. So can you comment about this kind of exciting, I think we're going to call it, athletic mindset or something like that. Can you comment on what you have in mind, how you think it's going to help young people develop confidence, resilience, emotional health, what I mean, things like that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So we've noticed that a lot of athletes, and I know I can speak for myself, most of the athletes that I've come in contact with, the things that they are asking me to help them with are more related to their mind than their body. So what I've noticed just interacting with probably at this point hundreds of athletes, maybe thousands, is the mind is something that's not necessarily being addressed in terms of in their current environment. Like every kid or athlete has a whatever you want to call it, a network that consists of the people around them. Like
Sure.
it's their teammates, their coaches, their parents, the people that surround that athlete. And really, with this service, we just want to be a part of that network for athletes and add, help give them the tools to have what I would call unshakable confidence, like being able to when things are going well, to enjoy
Hmm.
it, but not get too high. But if things aren't going well, not necessarily getting too low. So just being able to not be able to be shaken by things that may come up, whether it's how they play or
Sure.
how whatever it may be, maybe coach yelling at you or
Right.
whatever situation.
Some kind of disappointment or difficult situation. I think another word for what you're saying is sort of like resilience, right? Kind of like an ability to bounce back or deal with whatever might be going on in a way that feels that they have like an internal sense of I can overcome it, or this doesn't have to hold me back. Some kind of internal sense of being able to overcome challenges. What about you, Matt? I mean, that's a really thank you, Paul. That's such a I think it's a very thoughtful description and a very needed thing. Like we often, if you in the news, when you read about just all of us, like, but in young people specifically, there's a lot of focus on where does resilience come from? How do people develop a sense of unshakable those are very important skills that I think we care about and we value, but developing them or finding venues for developing them is not necessary. There's no, when we go to
Hmm.
school, the school curriculum is not explicitly focused on, okay, by the time you finish 12th grade, part of your curriculum is going to be resilience,
Yes.
confidence, social skills. I mean, those things are sort of, can grow organically, so to speak, but they're not inherently developed that way. So I'm curious, Matt, what
Yeah.
about for you from like as a clinician or just from your kind of experience, what do you see as unique about this kind of format? What do you hope to, how do you hope to contribute with your vantage point to this kind of development of young people?
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. Because I kind of think about the way that maybe I grew up as a young athlete, and reflecting on that, like I noticed that I did have kind of those um self-esteem barriers that I
Sure,
wasn't particularly conscious of, where I didn't really uh either have a platform to kind of do the work for myself, or never
sure.
really thought of it as a concept, something like this where I could kind of navigate those things. And also it wasn't offered to me, so if it's not offered, I'm not, as a kid, I'm not going to really take the initiative to do that kind of work. So I mean, but offering this, it does provide, I think the purpose of it would be to, provide young athletes of all ages a space to kind of identify, navigate, and address sort of the mental challenges that they face through sport. And I think it's going to be helpful for them, because it is kind of hard to find that time to do that. And it's
Sure.
um, for like sports specific. I mean, there really isn't a plethora of like sports minded therapists out there that can really use kind of their clinical background to help them navigate, those particular challenges. So, in a way, it's like we're kind of getting above the curve in that sense of, working, not just with sports-minded therapist, but also a former professional athlete who has their own unique perspective as well. And I think that can really work together well. And I hope something like this would become a lot more normal. And
For sure.
um, you know, it's exciting to see that we've kind of formed this idea together, and I
For
think it
sure.
could work out really well.
No, I think that's a really great point. And to your point about being a young athlete, yeah, I mean, probably a lot of our world is focused on like the physical skills. You could focus on the sport itself, or in school we focus on like writing or reading, sort of like cognitive skills, so to speak, but maybe not as much on the emotional skills, right? It's not like you're going to a practice in a sport and half the practice is on let's develop your confidence or emotional resilience, and half of it's on the proficiency of doing whatever the particular sport is. It's more we hope that the confidence will sort of come, but it's not formally somehow included in that or incorporated, right? Well, Bill, what about for you in terms of your? I know you've done so much work in your career in terms of working with
Yeah.
families or doing psychological evaluations. How do you see these challenges, or what kids need help with, maybe?
Right. One of the things that I was struck by when both Paul and Matt were speaking was, and this is independent of the athleticism of the individual.
For
People with
sure,
all different athletic abilities can benefit from this.
for sure.
And I think, Paul, you've said it many times in different ways, is athleticism doesn't carry the ball all the way. There needs to be that mindset that supports a person's athletic ability for them to be truly the best athlete they can be. So that's what I'm struck by. What I hear is it's something that all athletes, all student athletes can benefit from to one extent or another. And that's what's exciting about this program to me is it's far reaching. It can reach a lot of different people.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And also, I know that we kind of, when we talked about this program, one of the things one of our focus points was, okay, we're doing this through the avenue of athletics and sports, which is a really great way to connect and kind of, but these are skills that apply to a variety of aspects of life, right? The goal here is not only to be resilient, to be resilient in sports, but to hopefully carry that over to other aspects of one's life, whether it's friendships, relationships, academics, career, whatever the things that the person kind of faces. How do you see, Paul, Matt, or Bill, how do you see kind of like, I think Paul, like your just to use kind of you as one example, but you yourself are a great example of that, right? You were very successful as an athlete, but you also used those kind of like experiences and adversities. Now you're like a coach, you're an educator, you're right. You've kind of leveraged the things you've learned, but you apply it to a variety of your life. Of course, you do the actual sport coaching, but you're also like you're a mentor. There's a more holistic element to where you're applying that stuff. So how do you guys see these? How could this kind of like, I don't know, unshakable confidence or resilience, how could that translate into how do we hope to help the young athlete to translate that into the rest of their life or other things that they do? What do you guys see in terms of that?
Yeah,
Pat, maybe
no,
if we could, yeah, yeah,
oh, no, that's a good point. I think that the so like you said, in school, a lot of the things that are learned are technical in nature in terms of you're learning specific subjects, but the intangible qualities that we talk about, resilience, things like that, those are the qualities that determine an outcome in anything, oftentimes more than technical knowledge. Like everyone's seen people who weren't that and maybe not that intelligent, but for whatever reason, they just had certain intangibles. Maybe they just bounced back from things or whatever. And a lot of times they may have become maybe more successful than someone who may have had more technical knowledge in whatever it was. So school teaches technical skills. I think parents turn to sports for their kids because they want to learn the intangible skills. They
I
want their
see.
kids to learn it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they're not always under a coach that knows how to teach that. So I think again, it comes back to what we're doing now. Sometimes a coach will even maybe even make it worse than the day they showed up. So I think going back to what we're doing, I think it's going to help kids to get those tools. And for parents, this is going to kind of be like part of the reason why they put them in sports. Like I know most parents are putting their kids in a sport to develop some intangibles like work
Right.
ethic
For
and
sure. Or
those types
character,
of things.
sort of, right?
Yeah.
That's a really great point. And I know, Paul, one of the things you said, and that one of the you found Matt's profile online, and that's how all of us kind of connected. But I think I know that one of the things you said was you could see these challenges in the athletes you work with, but you thought that the combination of taking kind of like leveraging your knowledge and skill set, and also somebody who's sort of like whose day-to-day work has to do with sort of emotional health or how one sees oneself or one focuses one's attention. That that's it's sort of like a missing piece that you could see in this kind of world of young athletes, and that's how you found Matt. So I don't know, Matt, how do you what's your what's your perspective on like yeah we of course we if the idea is kids going to sports to develop these sort of intangibles, but then there's even the sport itself or the coaching or whatever may not always be specifically geared towards, right? So there's a lot of movies where like there's a good coach figure and they say some inspirational stuff,
Yeah.
and then the young person's like, oh yeah, I learned how to overcome adversity because of, and that's great. I'm sure that sometimes happens, but it's
Yeah.
not necessarily a formal part. The coaching curriculum in most, schools or whatever or programs is not specifically geared towards explicitly working on these things. So how do you what do you think, man? What's your what are your thoughts about any of that stuff?
Yeah, no. Yeah, definitely a great point there that, it's, there may have been those impactful coaches, that have, helped, mold that mindset and, that's not always available, but when it is, it can be really impactful. But like you kind of said on the flip side of that, it can also be harmful as well if, that can, potentially be harmful to self-esteem. So, that can really be important as well. I was also kind of thinking about how just even, you say the sport itself, I'm also thinking about, the mental health benefit from exercise in general and how
Yeah,
important that is. There's a lot of endorphin release, which is kind of that feel good chemical that gets released when you're moving. Any sort of movement can be really impactful for that. Um, so I mean, whenever there might be particular stressors in life, that can really be helpful in that, where it's just like, I'm just, that sort of, whatever sport it may be, kind of help them with centering themselves, living in the moment. I'm right now, there's so many things going on in my life right now, but right now I'm enjoying training with my fellow teammates. So I believe it's a really great place for that because, even just thinking about, yeah, when I was growing up and, whatever issues came, I felt good knowing that, I had tennis practice after school and I got to be around the guys and, just kind of forget about all that and just work together and,
for sure.
really help each other develop skills together. And just, it was
Good
something
environment.
to really look forward to. So, that was helpful.
That's really interesting. And you
I,
make a go ahead, Bill, please. Yeah.
well, I could also add as a parent, my experience with sports. My daughter was involved in varsity sports throughout high school in volleyball and basketball, and she had one of these coaches who definitely taught the mindset and definitely taught the intangibles and personal growth. It was all part of the process. Yes, they were competitive. Yes, they wanted to win, But alongside that was a lot of personal growth. And so as a parent, observing this, I absolutely see the value of this kind of dual purposed athletic participation. It just is really, I mean, I saw it personally in my own family, so it's great
That
when it
makes sense.
happens.
For sure. No, that's a great point, and I think, Matt, to go back to one thing you said, this I think that what we're working on and what you guys are the groups are going to do, I think they're sort of even wider reaching than sports because Matt, you made a really good point. How many, people in our world, we often think about like, okay, everybody wants to take better, most people want to take better care of themselves, their health, or be physically active, or eat healthy. But some of those things are just as difficult as performing in a sport because if one is overly self-critical or too focused on their mistakes or doesn't have a group to kind of succeed with or doesn't have a good mentor or feels it's too much. I mean, those same adversities that we're talking about when it comes to being part of a team or being an athlete and being successful and developing confidence, those same things apply to, as a therapist, I see a lot of people who might say, oh, I wish I, made better choices about my food or about exercise, but they struggle because what if it's new to them? Or they're not sure they're going to be successful at it, or they're afraid of humiliating themselves, some kind of like important emotional concerns that when they're able to overcome them or work to overcome them, they're more able to participate and kind of be more present as a person who makes hopefully good decisions. And so it applies to like physical health, sports, and like a lot of aspects of one's life in terms of overcoming challenges, being resilient, not feeling too stuck on one's mistakes, looking for good mentors, right? All kinds of kind of a lot of stuff like that. Um, okay, well, I know our goal is going to be the way we've talked about it is you guys are going to run, you're going to, we're going to look to run a few of these groups, I think, starting in the new year, right? We're going to start to send out some marketing kind of information so that people can find out more about how these groups are going to take shape. And I think part of the idea is we're going to run a few groups starting maybe, let's say, in February. And then we're going to see, and then we're going to gradually expand. I know, Paul, in particular, you have a wide array of contacts in terms of there are many, many young people who could benefit from this kind of programming. And so we're going to be kind of gradually rolling out the sort of development groups over time, and kind of like getting better and better at delivering those services. Um, I don't know, anything that you think parents should be aware of, parents who might be watching this or who might kind of see this recording, what should they keep in mind? Or anything that maybe, any questions that you think they might have that we could try to answer, or anticipate?
Yeah, I think so. With parents, any parent who has a kid who maybe um, they're playing a sport and maybe they're working hard at it, but for some reason, maybe the way they practice and is different from how they're playing, or maybe they're just not having fun, whatever it may be. But you know, I would say those are the kind of kids that, we think we can help because, ultimately, fun has to be a primary priority for really for anything. So I think that, from a parent perspective, parents that have kids that, uh, maybe they were having fun at one point or they're not, or maybe they're just not doing as well as they would like to, for whatever reason it may be. Those are kids that, we think we can, we would love to talk to and just try to be part of their team.
For sure, because it's hard to enjoy doing an activity if one is, I don't know, not feeling confident or is overly self-critical or too focused on their mistakes. That probably would make it hard to enjoy the sport or whatever athletic activity they're doing, and then they're missing out on those opportunities to grow. I don't know, be around others, sort of develop themselves, right? So that makes sense. Matt or Bill, what do you guys think? Anything that Bill, you mentioned a very helpful example of your own family, but other things that maybe parents, you know, would want parents to know or kind of be aware of this is a very exciting program, and I think a really unique kind of combination of skill sets that kids will be able to benefit from. Anything else that you guys think parents or families should know?
Yeah. Yeah, I would just say like if you're thinking about something like this with your kid, or wondering like maybe how they're doing if they haven't really you know kind of talked about it with you, just kind of just whenever you if they're actively playing in their sport right now, just kind of play and pay close attention to what you see, whether that be how they react after missing a shot, or
Yeah,
what their body language is like after a game,
for sure.
kind of the little things, looking out for that, and maybe have that conversation.
Right, sort of their emotion, be aware of their sort of emotional experience, and then know that
Hmm.
there's this new resource where, I mean, we could with some way work with adults too, but our focus right now is on young people in terms of taking those emotional cues and saying, "Oh, I could see that maybe they feel upset or bothered or disappointed, and they're having a hard
Hmm.
time overcoming some of those challenges." And the goal of the program is to get better at to not maybe not don't have to be perfect, but like more effective and more resilient at overcoming kind of day-to-day challenges, whether they're athletic or school, or otherwise, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Bill, anything for you? Any other? We're kind of coming up on our time for today, but anything else that you think
I
families should
liked
do?
what Paul said about if your child's not having fun, it could be a warning sign, because it's got to be fun. It's got to be an enjoyable part of life. And when it ceases to be a fun, enjoyable part of life, you're losing a lot from the potential benefits of participation in sport. So I, I I think that sums it up. It just adds so much to life, and goal setting and achievement and improvement and all of those good things set against the concept of I like doing this.
Right, and probably more likely to continue being kind of positively physically active and involved in sports if one is enjoying it and feels they have camaraderie or a social network or they feel good about
Yeah,
themselves, more likely to kind of
right,
make that a part of their life in an ongoing, hopefully lifelong way, right?
right, right, right.
Well, guys, I appreciate everybody's time today, and I think this is a really great idea. I know we're going to have kind of more and more information about these upcoming groups, and we're going to include some of that. When the podcast is, once we put out the recording, we'll put in some information along with the podcast so that parents and families or individuals who find this appealing, they can reach out and they can ask us questions. Paul, I'm sure you and Matt and Bill and I as well, but I'm sure you guys would be happy to hear from people who are considering this, might think it's a good fit, or not sure if it's a good fit for their family or their kid, but may want to ask a few questions. We really, I think our idea is we want to help the young person, but helping families and being and including the parents is an important aspect of helping young people. So we welcome questions and providing more information so that this could be a great option for many young people in our community. Um, you you right here, Bill, that this was your daughter's coach, Ben Bancroft.
Yeah, Ben Bancroft, I'll give him a shout out. Uh, it was a
That's great.
while ago. It
Wow,
was a
very
while
long ago. That's
ago,
amazing. No,
but
that's
my
incredible.
daughter still talks about him.
Well, I think it speaks
Oh,
to how big of an influence these kind of
Oh
positive,
yeah.
helpful, holistic role models can hopefully have on our lives. So that's really great. Thanks, guys. I know we're going to talk more about this project soon, and we'll get kind of be sharing information with our community as soon as it's available. So thanks for participating and thanks for joining our podcast.
yeah. Thanks for having
Thanks.
us.
Bye,
Yeah,
guys.
thank you.